Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Sean Bussey, Jay Goltz, and Jackie Russo talk about the new rules that may or may not ban non-compete clauses, increase the number of employees who must be paid overtime, and eliminate TikTok in the U.S. How much would those changes matter to each of their businesses? What might the owners do differently? Do the changes make sense? And why does it so often seem as if it's small businesses that get caught in the crossfire when the government tries to rein in abuse of big businesses? On the question of non-competes, Sean says he thinks they are often used by lazy businesses that haven't done the real work of building loyalty with employees and customers. Plus, do Sean, Jay, and Jackie ever regret starting a business? Have there been times when they thought about packing it in and trying something else? And also, are the terms business owner and entrepreneur interchangeable, or do they carry different connotations? Might there be a better term? Jay thinks there is. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine named the best newsletter for business owners and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Sean Bussey, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy. Jay Goltz, CEO of the Goltz Group, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. And Jackie Russo, CEO of Brand Russo, a marketing agency based in Lafayette, Louisiana. The episode is titled, I Don't Hate Regulation, but... Welcome, Sean, Jay, and Jackie. There's been a lot of regulatory news of late, and I want to start by getting your reactions to some of this news. I think I would first point out that all of this is subject to court challenge, so it's entirely possible that none of what we discuss here today will actually come to pass. But I think it's important to understand the ramifications of these issues, and who knows, at some point, maybe it will come to pass. So I'm talking about the potential banning of TikTok by Congress, the FTC's banning of non-compete clauses, and the Department of Labor's increasing of the threshold for overtime pay. Let's start with that one, the overtime pay issue. Do any of you expect that to have an impact on your businesses?
Absolutely.
How so, Jay?
Well, let's just review what it is. At the moment, if you make less than $35,000 a year, you can't be salaried or exempt. Okay. They're moving that to $43,888 July 1st, and then they're moving it to $58,000. So in my case, or everybody's case, here's the issue. If you've got someone making more than $58,000, okay, it's not going to affect you at all. All right. But if you've got someone making $35,000, $40,000, it's certainly going to affect you. And my argument is, yeah, that's probably too low of a number. But here's the problem. If you do have someone that makes $50,000 a year, and they might be working, 42 hours a week, 44 hours a week, whatever, you've got three choices. You can either raise them to $58,656. Thank you, government, for getting involved in my business. The person was perfectly happy making their 50. So now all of a sudden you have to either give them a raise, which is substantial, 16%, or you say to them, okay, we're going to make you non-exempt, we're going to make you hourly, but you don't have to punch in or out or anything. Well, just nothing's going to change. That's a problem.
It's a problem because you don't have it documented.
Right. Because what happens is, let's assume it's not your trusted long-term employee that's been with you for 20 years. You have another employee in the office that's going to be in the same situation, and they didn't work out. And you got rid of them after 6 months. And now they run to the department of whatever, and they go, oh, I was working from home all the time. He wasn't paying me overtime. You have no documentation. And it so happens my daughter-in-law is a labor attorney, and she said, yeah, you really need to have documentation. So it causes a problem. And then also keep in mind, if you put one person in the office on salary because they make the $58,000 656, and then the person that makes 50 is not on salary, you're going to have one punching in and punching out and one not. And like all it does is telegraph, oh yeah, they're making more money than you do. It's not great. And I understand the problem they're trying to address, but I wish they would have called me because I have a much better answer for it. So simple. If you're salaried and you work more than 50 hours a week, you get time and a half. Done. Would have solved the problem. Largely, it would have solved the problem.
Across the board, right? Not just based on salary, just anybody.
No, you could leave it at 40 for hourly, but if you're salaried, I mean, the thing people don't realize all the time is if you're on salary, you're also getting paid when you take off for whatever. I mean, it goes both ways. So, and I have people that are perfectly happy with the way it is, and I'm happy, they're happy, and now the government's telling us, oh no, we have to go change this. But if you simply want to get rid of the abuse, you could simply say if you're a salaried employee, at 50 hours, you get time and a half. That would have solved the problem, I believe. This is a very clumsy fix.
You still would have the documentation problem, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, it's like I said, I understand why they're doing it. And I'm not one of these people that hates I think the government needs to have some regulations on some stuff. But look at what they did. They raised it from 35 in 6 months. It's going up 65%. Really? 65%? They couldn't have taken it to 50,000 and left it there for a while. I just think it's overreach.
Sean, Jackie, will it have an impact on either of you?
It won't for me because we work 32-hour weeks.
Could you still have overtime?
Well, I almost don't talk when I know I'm going to talk about the 4-day week because I know it puts Jay into a tizzy.
I'm just here to watch
and enjoy.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we can have overtime if we're not even working 40 hours a week. Like, I don't know how this will affect us, but I'm watching to see if something changes.
Isn't it conceivable that you could have a crush and you have people who end up having to work 40 or 50 hours in a given week?
Well, the only times that's ever happened, the people who did that work were named Russo. And therefore, they did it to keep their company going and do whatever. I do for sure take advantage of the flexibility of my job. And so there are times when I'm working at night because I didn't work during the day because I went to a kid's school activity or, whatever.
Wait a second, though.
Yeah.
This does affect you. Wait. Let's think this out for a second. Do you have employees that make less than $58,656?
Yes.
Okay. This is saying that you can't just put them on salary. You have to pay them hourly, which means that there's going to need some documentation out that their hours they're working. I mean, that is the reality.
They're going to be very sad.
Is that a problem?
No, I mean, the documentation's not that hard. We will do it. But the reason why we have the schedule that we have and work the time that we work is that the creative types in my industry aren't real fond of documentation. And in the agencies where I worked before starting this one, it just became a system of lies where the graphic designer, for example, did not track his time all week long like he's supposed to. Now he has to turn it in to payroll. And so just makes something up and turns it in. And I thought, well, that's just not a good system for anybody. So we adapted and do it this way, and it's worked pretty well for us for 23 years. But if we have to have documentation, we'll have documentation. We're still going to only do a 4-day work week.
Keep in mind, though, you have exposure now, meaning you hired this person, you thought they were great, and it turns out they're terrible. And they run to the Department of Labor in whatever state they're in, and they say, I've been working 60 hours a week for this woman. She's not paying me overtime. And then they call you and they go, well, we got a complaint that you've been making people. And you go, no, that's not true. They're only working 32 hours a week. And they go, great, send us your records. And you say, yeah, I don't really have any records.
Right. No, that's a fair point. So it will affect in the sense that we'll have to have records now. I'm sure that I could pull the data of everybody's logins for emails and for our Basecamp and, for all of our tools. And you can see quite clearly no one's logged in and doing any work in those things. But I'd rather not have to do that retroactively. So, yes, in answer to your question, Lauren, it will affect us. We'll have to start tracking things differently.
So you certainly could make documentation saying that you're not allowed to work overtime. And if there's an exception, you need to contact me. You certainly, I think, could do something to
I like
shore
that.
up. Right. My point is this law is not really affecting you. You got the same exposure today that you're going to have then because you're telling that they're not. Well, are they salaried? They are salaried.
Salaried, yep.
All right, I take it back. They are salaried now. This is going to affect you because now they're going to not be able to be salaried. So, yeah, sure.
Right.
Sean, any impact on you?
No.
Because your salaries are too high?
I mean, salaries are too high. We live in a really expensive city. I shifted the company a long time ago from, interestingly, we were hourly for a long time. And I sort of had this theory that, to Jackie's point, getting people to track their time, if you paid them by their tracking, it would create more accurate timekeeping. I don't know if that actually held true, and it created a lot of other problems. So just sort of an overarching change in the company towards greater level of professionalization and doing higher value work meant paying people more money, choosing to do certain types of work and not other types of work. So I guess in some ways we're fortunate in that this doesn't impact us. It means my payroll's really high, but I guess that's,
And in my case, I have 130 people. It's affecting 2 people. So It's not the end of the world, but it is affecting 2 people that I'm going to have to decide. The one guy, if you recall, that we're going to do this a few years ago. So I had to have the conversation. He goes, he's 50 years old. He said, I haven't punched in since I was 20 years old at a pizza place, so he wasn't happy about it. But then they backed off it, so it wasn't an issue. So it's causing a little issue. It's not the end of the world, but
I think this is another good example of who's abusing the system, right? And the folks that are abusing the system, I think by and large, are large corporate chains that, love the idea of having a quote unquote salaried manager at a low price point that they work 60, 70 hours a week. And what happens in the case this over and over again, right? You got a lot of small business owners, some I'm sure who abuse the system. But by and large, you're getting caught up in a fix that's designed for a different group, which is larger corporations, that's going to impact smaller businesses. And this is kind of the theme, I think, of a lot of regulation is that the intentions are good, but it creates undue paperwork burden on small business owners. And I think that's the frustrating part of it.
Here's another issue. This is a national thing. How could you have the same number for... Sean, do you think you're in one of the highest income areas in the country?
We're pretty high, yeah.
Okay, let's say you, California, New York. Okay,
yeah.
How do you do the same number for you, California, New York, fine, and then have it for Alabama, Mississippi, and where the average income is?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's totally crazy.
Well, I think the answer to that, it may still be crazy, but I think they determine the number based on indexing to the lower cost areas. Jay, in your case, I didn't realize that it's only going to affect 2 people. That makes it sound like this is not really a money issue for you. It's more the bureaucracy. Is that right?
No. It is a money issue. Let's just go about one person in particular. What do you do about the person who's making $50,000 a year? It's the market rate. They're being paid well. They're happy with what they're making. I'm happy with paying it. They're salaried. And now I have to... Well, I guess it is a paperwork. Now I have to say to them, you can't be on salary, or I have to go pay them $8,000 more. Or, okay, you're no longer an exempt employee. You're now you're now non-exempt, and you need to document your time. And when you're off for a day, we're going to have to, you're not going to get paid. It is a problem with 1-2 people. I mean, that's the problem with drawing a line in the sand somewhere. That's why I say, and if they would have made it 50, it would have there's a lot of people in this country making $50-some thousand a year. Lots. It could have gone from 35 to 48 and it would have taken care of some of the problem. But, like I said, I understand they got a problem. I don't know that this is going to fix it. The big corporations will. Here's the problem. So now they pay the manager $58,656 and they still work 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Did that really fix the problem?
I don't think there's an easy answer to this. I think from a small business perspective, one drawback towards, so you can look at it through the larger cultural perspective of, hey, we want to do right by people. We want a society where people are paid fairly, and we need regulation because large corporations are really abusive to their employees for the most part. It takes away the competitive advantage that small businesses have where, we can go and look at you can work at those large companies and they'll just totally abuse you. You can come here and have a great experience, and we're really innovative in how we pay people and da, 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 da. So it's sort of like applying a cookie cutter methodology to everybody even though, I think small businesses like creativity. And I think that's the problem with all of these kind of labor and wage laws.
With that being said, there are certainly some small business people who, I don't know if taking advantage is the right word, but
For sure. Oh, yeah.
We just passed a law, not we, they just passed a law in Louisiana that you no longer have to provide a lunch break for minors
For children.
who work at your business. Yeah.
Your
For
state
children.
is so F, Jackie. I'm sorry.
Dude, tell me about it.
They are such an abusive state. It's crazy. It's like a corporatist.
It's awful.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
God.
Yeah.
which is why I think we all agree the government does need to have some regulation. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one, non-competes. The FTC believes that by banning non-competes, they will free up employees to take better jobs or to start their own businesses. They expect a lot of business starts and new jobs as a result. Business groups are opposed, big business groups in particular. They see employees stealing secret sauce and running off to a competitor. Do any of you use non-competes?
I have, and I think there's so much nonsense in what you just said, repeating what they're doing, in that, first of all, there's a difference between a non-compete and a confidentiality thing. The secret sauce, I'm not a labor attorney, but I believe that can be covered by a confidentiality agreement. They're not the same
You're
thing.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
I read some of the stuff. They said, it'll be more free flow of information and more best practices. Oh, great. So you can figure out how to do something better. And let's share with all your competitors. Again, it's not going to ruin my life. They did carve out people making a lot of money can still get them. Have people been abusing those? I guess I haven't been.
Again, it's the same situation, right? It's these businesses where, come on, they're making hairdressers sign non-competes. It's just crazy.
Well, you know why they're doing that? They're doing that because the hairdresser has a following.
Yeah.
And when they leave and go to another salon, they take their clients with. The question is, do you really think you're going to stop that, for God's sakes?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Jackie? Our, kind of the industry, we're sort of adjacent here. I remember meeting a guy years ago who worked at an ad agency. He brought in like $1 million a year in business to the agency. One day he up and left, started his own thing. And I promise you a bunch of those clients went with him. What's your take on this idea?
That's the risk, is that you absolutely can have, whether it's an agency, business development person who walks out the door with a client roster and starts their own agency. I've seen it in my market over and over and over again. Or a TV newscaster who has a huge following, a radio DJ who leaves to go to a competitor. I think it's very sticky. I think that those non-competes can be abusive, but they also in some ways protect the business that invested a lot of resources in building that person's brand.
Mm-hmm.
But then it gets back to, okay, but it's their brand. But this one's tricky. Part of me thinks, okay, businesses could use a little protection from that. But on the other hand, I think it's laughable when they go, it's going to spur a lot of new business. I think that's just laughable. I would have started a new business, but I can't because I have no non-compete. Now that I don't have a non-compete, I'm going to go and leverage up my house and quit my job and start my new bit. Really? That's going to be the difference between starting your own business? I have a hard time believing it's going to make any meaningful effect on that. Am I wrong?
I think you might be a little bit wrong.
Just a little, though. That's my point. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm just going, I doubt it's going to be a big engine driver for the country.
Are you aware that in California, non-competes are effectively banned? So Silicon Valley hasn't been able to use non-competes. And there are a lot of people there who credit it with the success, to whatever extent you consider Silicon Valley a success. You're talking about tech businesses where there really are secrets there. And it doesn't really seem to have put the brakes on there. And certainly you have people leaving companies and starting businesses there.
I think this is largely a good thing. I generally think it's something that's abused more than a fair situation. And I also think it makes for, I don't know, I might insult some people here, but I think a lot of times non-competes are a representation of a lazy business, meaning that the business hasn't built itself in a way to where the customer is buying the brand. it's buying a person within the business. And that can be a hard thing to change in some businesses, but it is something that you can do and should do as a business to not make it about a person, but to make it about the company. And I think a lot of businesses substitute these non-competes for being kind of lazy about it. And I could be wrong on that.
Is that something you think about, Sean?
Well, yeah. I mean, I thought about it from the minute I heard the story of, the account manager leaving and taking all his clients with him. And I realized that I have to build a business where the value derived from it is from the team, not from a super smart individual or a super charming or super charismatic. And that, I think that's often the problem is the businesses, in an attempt to be efficient, it creates a sort of an Achilles heel. With the organization. I see that a lot in ad agencies and marketing firms where, they say, this is your point of contact. This is Bob. He's your account manager. And Bob makes himself really indispensable to the client. And then when Bob leaves, the client's like, wait a minute. And we just had this happen with our insurance broker. We had an awesome insurance broker. The company she worked for was garbage. And when she left, they actually were really bad. They were like, we're going to close your account and all this sort of thing. I was like, whoa, it's very combative. And I was like, yeah, let's leave these guys. They're terrible. But our person was wonderful. And so I think it's a really good example of you can have great people operating in bad businesses. And the bad business will use things like non-competes and threats and so forth to try to kind of keep the status quo. And so I like that this prevents that type of behavior.
Sean, have you also found that in a lot of situations, that one person, that cult of personality tends to be kind of the way a consultative business goes. And so if you're talking about more of a process and team approach, does that mean you put everybody kind of into pods? So you've got multiple points of contact for every client?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've pushed on that hard. Even on the account management side, for the longest time, I would make the case to the client, we staff this with effectively 2 account managers for a couple of reasons. One is you get diversity of insight and service, but the second you get redundancy. So somebody can actually take a vacation and things happen while that person is gone, and then Selfishly, I also know that makes the client really think about the company as a team of people, not one superstar. And so it's always like a 2-person account team. And then beyond that, we have our team members kind of in and out of the relationship. So you might have somebody who's an art director come in and do a bunch of work for several months. You might have a graphic designer participate. You might have somebody who's doing writing or analytics. So you're kind of constantly cycling people into the client account so that the client really sees that the value is not just one really charismatic person. It's actually a group of people working together. And I think ad agencies and marketing firms and a lot of consultancies get that wrong, and that they build it around the cult of the individual. And I know a lot of that is driven by, we need to be more efficient. We need to spend less hours. The less hours we spend with a client, the more money we'll make. But it's a vicious cycle because then you get this problem of customers start to perceive that it's one person doing all the work. And when that person leaves, then they start to question, well, why am I with this company at all? So I think for professional services businesses, this is really important, really, really important that you don't have the cult of personality within your business. I don't know, Jackie, what do you think?
No, I agree 100%. And what's interesting to me is we have some clients who found themselves in this position, 2 or 3 different companies, where they were the founder and they were the face, and then they didn't have the time to do the day-to-day work anymore. So in order to scale, it had to change. And then when they wanted to sell, it had to change. And so I think if you can do it right from the beginning, you're going to put yourself in a far better spot.
You've got your banker person that you've got a good relationship with. They're the ones fronting for you. They're the ones making things happen at the bank. And sometimes the banks are no good and this person decides to leave. I would say that would be a thing that I wouldn't want them to have a restrictive covenant to go somewhere else because they had to leave the bank because they weren't giving them the service that I needed. And I want to follow that person, and I have. So I can see where this is going to benefit some customers.
For sure. I mean, if my insurance broker had a non-compete, that would have sucked. She's great. And I want to follow her, because largely we're buying a commodity. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. It's healthcare, right? So I think this is more often than not, it's a tool for businesses that are actually not that great and haven't built a brand. They're reliant on individuals and their superpowers.
Or they haven't been good at treating their employees well. The employees want to stay.
Yeah, that's true too.
That's the other
one.
Yeah,
for sure.
Let's talk about TikTok. Lots of businesses, lots of individuals make a living on TikTok. I never thought it would come to this. I still don't really believe it's going to go away, but it definitely seems a little more plausible now.
It's not going to go away. No. It's not going away, right? And I think the TikTok ban is such a misnomer.
Well, they're trying to force them to sell, and if they don't, then they could be banned.
Right. That is not going to happen. There is so much money on the table here that somebody's either going to get a payday or it's not going to get banned. That's the hyperbole being pushed by the media.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. I mean, on the one hand, it's being described as a national security issue. That whole discussion is very vague. We don't really, I haven't seen anything concrete about that. I don't think there's any evidence that it's happened thus far. On the other hand, as you were saying, Sean, there's real money being made here, and it's just hard to imagine that being blown up. But just play along. Suppose it were. Problem for you, Sean or Jackie?
Not a problem at all for me, because I just philosophically, I'm totally opposed to TikTok. I mean,
What's the philosophy?
I feel like the national security threats are not overblown. I think the ability to manipulate an audience is massive. And I think the fact that you have an owner who is, not a friendly force, in terms of the United States, I think it's super risky. And actually,
couldn't you say the same thing of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter to some extent?
I mean, those are socially corrosive and cancerous, but that's different than national security threats. And true, Facebook in 2016 was taken advantage of, but there's a big difference when ownership resides in the United States versus when it resides overseas, and you have an active participant trying to undermine the country. So it's a different situation. And I think there actually is evidence, and I know it's cloaked and veiled, but when you see these national security people in front of Congress saying, we can't really tell you the full story, but it is bad, I think it's really worth paying attention to. That's my take on it. I think it's a huge risk to us. And I think this is right legislation.
I 100% agree with every single word Sean said. I was marking off my bullet points as he was talking. I'm like, covered. I would add one small piece to that, which is not only is it all that stuff, but if you look at the version of TikTok that's served in the US to the version of TikTok that's served in other countries, it's bad.
All right. Well, if the two of you feel that way, I certainly support both of you. And Sean, I think you should run for president of the United States. I'm just saying.
Jackie, what were you referring to? What's the difference between TikTok here and elsewhere?
So we have some international clients, and they talk about what TikTok looks like in their countries. And I talk about and now I'm not a heavy TikTok user at all. I just have never gotten into it. Felt like it was turning your brain to mush more than the others, so I've kind of avoided it. But when they talk about how very rarely they see negative things, controversial things, divisive things, inappropriate things, and I look just around at the people, on a subway car with me. Now, part of it is the algorithm feeding you what you're asking for. I don't doubt that. I had a client one time say, I don't like TikTok at all because it is just half naked girls in bikinis. And I said, not on anyone else's, sir, but yours. You have to click it to get it, which is a really awkward board meeting. Really awkward. So there is a little bit of you have to click it to get it, but there's also, it's the divisiveness. And, I don't want to turn this into a political episode, and I'm going to try to deliver this piece of information without I don't know how I can. When I look at the Gen Z approach and stance on what's happening with Palestine and Israel, and how much of it is fueled by their consumption of media on TikTok, that tells me that there is a concerted effort to cause a generation to have a certain opinion about a political climate that, oddly enough, is not shared by the mainstream media or a ton of other people. So that's manipulation at its purest sense.
Yeah.
Jackie, let me ask you this. One of the big reasons TikTok took off, I think, is because it's got a different kind of algorithm. You can be more easily discovered on TikTok. If you haven't built a following
Correct.
on Facebook or Instagram, you got a problem on TikTok. You could come in as a new user and establish a following more easily, which is why a lot of businesses have taken to using it. Have you used it as a weapon? Has it been effective for you?
Well, my clients in the B2B space, it's not a good match for them. So that's how I've been able to avoid having to spend a lot of time on it personally, because I would never put a client on something I'm not very intrinsically familiar with. And so because it's not a fit for my clients, it doesn't require my time and energy. All that to be said, obviously, I'm aware of it. I've used it. I have an account. I follow the stats. I have to pay attention. If something changes and it becomes something that would be valuable to one of my clients, then I'd have to be all up in it. So I know as much as I can know without being a daily habitual user. All of that to say, it's fascinating to me to watch over and over again new users, as you referred to them, get that immediate first rush and that dopamine thrill of I've gone quote unquote viral, and then it drops off and they have to work so hard to get back up again. That is baked into the US version system where you take off and then you don't stay there. You have to work to get back up there. And it is interesting to understand how much that's manipulation too.
Yeah. Such a good insight, Jackie. It's taking advantage of the human, it's taking advantage of what's called asymmetric reward, which is why gambling is so successful, which is that when you reward us consistently and predictably, we actually get bored with it and lose excitement. And what TikTok has figured out, and all the social media channels really, is that the asymmetric reward. Oh my God, I'm winning. Wait, where did it go? Oh, I want to get, oh, wait, where did it go? And so that piece is just fueling the dopamine response, which causes people to stay even more addicted to it. And this is a larger problem than just TikTok in terms of social media and what it's doing to our kids. But I think TikTok is particularly pernicious. And I think your example is exactly right. I've been watching that whole kind of thing unfold and going like, wow, how is it that an entire generation is suddenly so politically aware about Palestine, having not cared about it forever? Like, I promise you, the protesters had no involvement or investment in the Middle East prior to like a year ago.
Well, wait, that's not true. Come on. A lot of them are from Palestine and they've been living with it their whole life. That's clearly not.
Sure. But the white suburban kids who are suddenly, suddenly politically active, that just doesn't come out of nowhere. And I get it. What they're seeing going on over there is really horrific. And we can just talk about the whole leadership problem over there in Israel. But it is so interesting how asymmetric it is in terms of the response and how powerful it is in such a short period of time. And I mean, this just tells me there's just massive manipulation of the user base. Now, whether that's coming out of China or it's that certain groups have figured out how to massage the system, I don't know, but I think it's so risky.
Sean, that was that was truly an excellent other side that I didn't think about. You do have an excellent point to that, which is why you should be running for the president of the United States.
Well, only if you'll be my VP, Jay.
All right. Let's come back to 21 Hats and reality here for a minute. I think these conversations about each of these changes underscores a couple of points. One is there aren't enough people who understand what goes into running a business. I think you guys will probably agree with me on that. And that if everybody did understand it better, some of these decisions might look a little bit different, which brings me around to a question I'd like to ask you guys, which is, we're always talking about challenges here. There are always plenty of challenges, even when there aren't new regulations and government changes to deal with. Do you ever regret starting a business? And do you ever think about what else you might have done? Or is there enough joy in building a business that's just not an issue for you? Anybody?
Absolutely not. Never crossed my mind. It's not easy. There's 10 different things, challenges that are come up all the time, but I've never regretted it. I've never thought about doing anything different. And I have accepted the fact that it's not simple and you just have to deal with what comes up. And there's tremendous joy in owning your own business, from taking care of customers to developing a staff and empowering them and giving them security and respect and satisfaction themselves, to making money. So my answer is absolutely not. Never think about it.
Sean, do you ever regret it, or do you find enough joy in what you're doing that just doesn't occur to you?
Here's the thing. My personality is generally one where I don't look backwards. I don't find there's a ton of value in looking backwards in order to find regret. I think looking backwards is valuable in order to think about how you maybe want to do things differently in the future. But that said, I mean, there have been moments for sure where I'm like, what am I doing here? Why? This is crazy. Like, I'll say January of 2010, when the recession was late to Oregon and Portland. And boy, when it came, it really eviscerated me. And, I really questioned doing it. I even looked around at taking a job, and it was just so depressing. I didn't do anything. But what's really funny, I was just at an event where I heard from the guy who founded UGG Boots. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he said something, really thoughtful, especially for somebody who's a little bit older, of like, every really terrible situation has kind of been the seed to grow into a flower of something good for him. And so he sort of changed his mindset when something really bad happens to think, okay, well, something good's going to be coming. It isn't in the moment, but I think that I try to embrace that mindset these days, because it is true. The recession totally forced me to rebuild my business in a totally different way that ended up helping it grow in leaps and bounds.
Listen, 2008, it forced me to buy a big factory building for super cheap. That it's worked out great. That without the recession, I would have never done that.
I'm an accidental entrepreneur, but I don't regret it for a minute. I think it's been one of the greatest gifts of my life, even through the challenging times, 9/11, the financial crisis, COVID. Pick a challenge. I mean, we're in oil and gas territory, so every time y'all get cheap gas, we get half of our workforce laid off. But through all of those, I am so grateful for what it has afforded me to spend time with my kids, to build a business and careers for 20-something people that I get to work with, to build the kind of company where I want to work. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
The time with the kids kind of makes me laugh a little bit, because ever since I became a business owner, I'm working twice as hard for about 20% of the money.
I was just going to say, I would put them to bed and then continue working in the day. But I got to have dinner with them at 5. I got to read them a bedtime story. Obviously, they're in college now. This is years ago when they were little. I got to be able to take off and go have lunch with them at school, or go to their sporting events at 3:00 in the afternoon. There's a trade-off there. I have to still do my work at another time, but I wouldn't have it any other way that I could do both.
There was a worker on the job site that I was at the other day, and his shirt said, the only profit I made today was knowledge. I do think that's an unspoken value I've gotten out of the business all these years, is that the ability to learn and kind of keep learning as an owner is just so incredibly high. And a lot of jobs aren't structured that way. A lot of jobs are really structured to kind of do the same thing over and over again. And I think if you're somebody who's constantly curious and loves learning, you can't beat entrepreneurship for that.
Sean, I have a new phrase for you. It's called learn it all, not know it all.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay, but you have to agree, the whole definition of entrepreneur is to take risks, that some people simply don't have the stomach to do it. It's going to be very challenging and difficult, and it's just not for everybody.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
Well, I have to tell you, people that are watching Shark Tank all the time, I'm afraid that a lot of the population thinks that entrepreneurship is all about getting the big idea. And that's simply not the case.
Yeah.
I mean,
and also funding like that's something that's really changed in the last 20 years, for me, which is I used to sort of think of like starting a business as about having an idea and the perseverance to pursue it. And, there's just been, especially with Silicon Valley, a switch of mindset that entrepreneurship is about raising money.
Yeah, they think that, successful, he raised money. Listen, just yesterday, I think it was in the report, Foxtrot in Chicago, upscale food place. There's 2 doors down from one of my stores. My kid's in real estate, and he was thinking of putting one of those into a shopping center. And I said, I'd be real careful with that, because all I hear about is they keep raising money, and then poof, they just closed one day, overnight. And there's a lot of that.
I was intrigued by what you said, Jay, about a lot of people thinking that entrepreneurship is about the big idea. I've had a couple of conversations of late with people who defined entrepreneurship to me as doing something that has never been done before. And it kind of set me back, because I've never thought of it that way. I mean, obviously, if you're, lucky enough or smart enough to be in a position to do something that's never been done before, and you can innovate a whole new, business or industry, that's a great thing. And people make a lot of money doing that. But I don't see that as the definition of entrepreneurship. And I think I know a lot of entrepreneurs who haven't done anything of the sort. Am I right?
It can't be 1%. I mean, that might be 1/10 of it. Really, I mean, most people are better executors. They're running a better restaurant. They're running a better marketing agency. They're doing something better. But like, how many people can come up with, it's just, like I said, it can't be 1% of the businesses started have some kind of new concept. I mean, we all hear about them, but that's because they're in the news. But most people are running businesses that have been around for years and doing a better job at it.
I'm curious to all of you, do you see the word entrepreneur and the word business owner as different, the same? How do you respond when you hear that word? Different?
Different,
for sure.
Different.
In what way?
And I say that from being in business groups for years. I've been in 4 or 5 different business groups. And when I look around the room with the 12 people in it, and this is just my case, I'm sure it's not always the case, but I think there's something to this. I'm usually only one of 1, 2, or 3 entrepreneurs. The rest took over the family business.
Oh, so you see entrepreneur as a person who starts something as opposed to...
Took the risk. Yeah, that started something.
Okay.
I would take that and add to it, because an entrepreneur doesn't just start one thing. I think that they tend to continue to look at how to change, advance, grow, nurture, improve, invent. It's not a one and done, where a business owner owns a business and runs the business.
But if they started it from scratch by themselves, you can't say they're not an entrepreneur.
Sure.
I don't use that word to describe myself hardly ever.
I never do, because it's just so filled with, I just think it's pretentious on some level. If someone goes, what do you do? I don't go, I'm an entrepreneur. I say, I own a picture framing business and a furniture store. I've never said that to someone. I just find it too much. Which gets interesting, because Sean, I noticed on your signature, you sent me an email, you call yourself founder. And I find that interesting, because my guess is you might have the same issue I have. I don't want to call myself entrepreneur. And now I don't want to call myself CEO, because that's got so much negative baggage attached to it.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of baggage in both ends of that spectrum. I think the thing that I've not appreciated about the word entrepreneur, especially the way it's manifested in maybe the last 5 or 10 years, is sort of this like hero-like cult. Like, oh, he raised, $10 million, or she did X, Y, and Z. And it gets celebrated in the media and these publications as this like rah, rah, rah kind of thing. And there's often so much emptiness behind it. With all the stuff that happened with Adam Neumann and WeWork, that's a really good example for me of like the thing that I struggle with when I hear the word entrepreneur, and why I don't use it for myself, is like these folks who, hype up the situation. And when you look behind the curtain, it's just really ugly. And so, it's like, I don't know that business owner is the right word, but I almost gravitate more towards that, because to me, there's a sense of, I really appreciate building something meaningful that has substance behind it, whether it's huge or small or whatever. And I don't know that there's really a word for that.
No, that's a problem. And I agree with you. Business owner, okay, no baggage with that, which is why you put founder. Okay, founder, that's nothing wrong with that. But you say CEO, wow. What that means today is not pretty. And then, like you said, that the entrepreneur thing, just swashbuckling, raising money, borrowing money, it's like, not so much.
And I know that's not true for a lot of people who call themselves entrepreneurs.
A lot of people.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I get it. I really do. It's just an interesting, it's almost like we lack the language to describe what I'm talking about when I talk about that type of entrepreneur. And I think that's largely who listens to this show, honestly. I think it's meaningful people, like people who are trying to build something thoughtful, that they care about the people who work for them. The people I've met.
And what are you calling them? Who are those people?
I don't have a good word for it.
I got the
really
name. This is what they're called. They're called 21 Hatters.
Well, as with many issues we discuss here, I think we have no solution to this one. So I would love to hear thoughts from anybody who listens to this. Please let me know what you think. Where do you draw the line? What's the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner? But in the meantime, my thanks to Sean Bussey, Jay Goltz, and Jackie Russo, and to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, everybody. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.